a story about a water bottle that only wanted to get kissed, and it got kissed once someone was drinking that water bottle.
Well, this is going to be
And it wasn't actually kissing, it was actually drinking.
the classic story about an evil witch that was very, very mad at a merchant because she wanted to buy a crazy chicken. And the chicken salesman instead sold him a rooster. And so at 4 in the morning, sometimes 4:30 at the latest, her chicken would go because it wasn't a chicken, it was a rooster, and it would wake the evil witch up. And so, after 2 mornings of not sleeping, he was so mad that he went to the town, found the merchant that had sold him the rooster, and cursed him and turned him into a water bottle. And the curse was that until somebody gave them a true kiss, the curse would not be lifted, meaning he would still be a water bottle. And so he took him in the form of a water bottle and threw him as far as she could into the river. And off we went, the merchant turned into a water bottle, floating and floating and floating until it landed at the shore of the river and started getting covered with pebbles and sand and more pebbles and more sand and more pebbles and more sand. And the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. And over time, more and more pebbles and more sand was covering him, which was in the form of a water bottle. Well, after a few years of laying there, a huge storm happened upriver, and suddenly a raging current, a torrent of water filled with debris and filled with rocks the size of cars, and little rocks and little pebbles came rushing down and washed away the water bottle with lots of sand and buried it under 2 meters of sand and pebbles and rocks and stones and sticks, about 50 meters away from the normal shore of the river. And then the water subsided, but the water bottle remained hidden. And so time passed. Hundreds of years turned into thousands of years. Everybody that the merchant knew had long been gone. Towns, cities, everything had changed. Even the river started changing its course, meandering, wandering far away from the original place. And dirt started growing where the sand was. Trees started growing and covering everything. And then hundreds of thousands of years passed. And one day, a big city was being built in the land that hundreds of thousands of years ago had been part of this river. And somebody was excavating to build um, a basement for a house. And suddenly, they found this water bottle. And everybody was amazed because they didn't know that they were um, archaeological artifacts, meaning things that were so old, buried in the dirt. Uh, but here's the thing, the merchant, when he was turned into a water bottle, lost consciousness. So he was not aware that hundreds of thousands of years had passed. He just one day saw the evil witch, and he felt like he disappeared until this this worker that was operating this machinery to dig the dirt to build the basement found this water bottle, and it just happened to be a very hot day, and so he thought it would be so cool to drink from an ancient water bottle. I mean, why not? nobody was there to see him. Why not give it a try? And so he took the water bottle, put a lot of fresh water inside, and drank and drank to its heart's content. Oh, he was so happy and so satiated. And so he put the water bottle in his house and he just left. Well, as soon as he left, poof, the water bottle turned back into the chicken merchant. But it was hundreds of thousands of years in the future, about the time where we're living now. There was electricity and television and phones and internet and technologies. Even homes look very different now than what they did hundreds of years ago. I mean, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And even the language had changed. And so the merchant appeared and had no clue where he was. He had no clue that he was in the future. And he was so crazy. And so he escaped, but not before he started looking for food because he was so hungry after hundreds of thousands of years. But he had no clue what a fridge was. So he started looking for food in the toilet, in the closets. He started looking for food until he found the dog food. And he didn't know what it was, but it smelled like food. And he was so hungry that he started eating it. And then when he felt like he wanted to go to the bathroom, but there were no bathrooms like modern bathrooms we have now with toilets and such hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so he just decided to poop in the middle of the corner of the living room. And then he left. Well, when the worker came back home, he thought that a dog had broken in because the dog food was half eaten and there was poop in the living room, which is typical of a dog. And he thought, oh, what's wrong with this dog? And so the merchant took off in search of his chickens. Well, um, just so happened that there was a store that sold chickens nearby. And so he went in. Now, mind you, he wasn't dressed like normal everyday people you see on the store. He was dressed in a very weird fashion from his time, so long in the past. So everybody was looking at him. And he was also curious about everybody else because the place was very weird and the people were very strange as well. And so when he saw the chickens, you remember like in Rural King where they have the chickens for sale?
Yeah.
Well, he went inside of there and he sat with the chickens that were on sale. And when people tried to get him out of there, he wouldn't understand the language. So he just stared there, petting the chickens. And they had to call the police to get him out of there. And nobody knew who he was. Until someone saw in a book, in an ancient book, because the police published a photo of the guy to see if anybody had any information about him because nobody knew what he was saying. They couldn't understand his language. He didn't have any identification. They didn't know who he was. And all he could do was say, "Caw, caw, caw," was the only thing they understood. He loved chickens. And so somebody had seen in a very, very ancient book depictions and drawings of the crazy kitchen caretaker merchant. And so they thought they recognized him. And so they came to see the police and they showed him the picture and nobody would believe him. And so this person that had recognized the chicken caretaker in the book asked the police if they could bring the chicken caretaker with him to his house because they had lots of chickens to see if he would feel better with chickens, and he did. And so this person decided that he could let the chicken caretaker live with him so he could take care of the chickens. And so they became great friends. And as the years passed, he started learning the new language. And when he started learning to speak, he started telling stories about his life without knowing that that was hundreds of thousands of years ago until he got to the part about the evil witch. And then he remembered. And then he realized what had happened. And he realized that he lost all of his friends, but he also realized that now he lived hundreds of thousands of years in the future, which was super cool for him. And he became a chicken storyteller. And from that day on, he would work with chickens, telling stories to the chickens and telling stories to people about chickens. And he is now the famous chicken whisperer of the 21st century that makes every chicken super plucky and lay more eggs.